Before you read any further, I want you to ask yourself something. What if a camera could show you the future? Not the good parts, not the birthdays or the graduations, but the 1 second right before something terrible happens to the person standing in front of the lens. What if that camera was sitting on a folding table at an estate sale for $40, wrapped in cracked leather, waiting for exactly the right person to pick it up? This is the story of that camera. And by the end, you might want to think twice before you ever buy something secondhand again. It started on a gray Saturday morning in a small town outside Portland, Oregon, at an estate sale that smelled like old paper and dust. Emily Carter, a 26-year-old photography grad student, wasn't looking for anything in particular. She just liked digging through boxes of other people's lives. Chipped teacups, faded postcards, cameras nobody used anymore. That's when she saw it, sitting alone on a card table at the back of the garage. A 1960s Rolleiflex, its black leather casing worn soft at the edges, a thin layer of rust along the metal trim. An elderly man running the sale watched her pick it up. He didn't smile. He just said, "That camera's seen a lot, sweetheart. You be careful with it." Emily laughed it off, the way you do when an old man says something a little too dramatic about a $40 camera, and she bought it without a second thought. That night, back at her apartment, she cleaned the lens, loaded a fresh roll of film, and took a photo of her roommate, Sarah, laughing on the couch. This wasn't a digital camera. The film had to be developed the old-fashioned way, which meant she wouldn't see the results for a couple of days. When she finally picked up the prints from the lab, something in Sarah's photo caught her eye. Just behind Sarah's left shoulder, faint and blurry, there was a shadow. Not a shadow from furniture, not a shadow from a lamp, a shadow shaped almost like a person standing directly behind her, except Sarah had been alone on that couch. Emily brushed it off as a light leak, the kind of quirk you'd expect from a 60-year-old camera. Old film cameras do strange things. But 5 days later, Sarah was hit by a truck while riding her bike to campus. She survived, but her leg was broken in 3 places. Standing in the hospital waiting room, Emily couldn't stop thinking about that photograph, that shadow, the shape that had been standing behind Sarah before any of this happened. She told herself it was a coincidence. Accidents happen to people all the time. But a week later, she photographed her boyfriend, Jake, sitting on the quad, just for fun, just to test the camera again. This time, the shadow was clearer. It hovered just above Jake's head, like something leaning in close, studying him. 3 days after that, Jake fell down a flight of stairs at a party and hit his head hard enough that the ER doctors told him he was lucky to be alive. That's when Emily stopped telling herself it was a coincidence. She started to believe the camera wasn't just taking pictures, it was showing her a preview, a glimpse of the exact moment before something went terribly wrong for whoever stood in front of the lens. That shadow, that blurry shape, always seemed to be waiting near the person who was about to suffer. Emily locked the camera in a closet, telling herself that if she never photographed anyone again, nothing else bad would happen.
But a few nights later, she woke up standing in front of her bathroom mirror, camera in hand, with no memory of how she got there. She had taken a photo of herself in the mirror's reflection. She just didn't remember doing it. When that roll came back from the lab days later, there it was, her own reflection, and behind her, that same shadow, closer than it had ever been before. Emily panicked. She tried to track down the old man from the estate sale, but when she went back to the address, the house was empty, the yard overgrown, like no sale had ever happened there at all. She searched online for the camera's serial number and found an old forum post from 1974. A photographer named David Harper had written that his camera seemed to capture people's last photo before something happened to them. The thread ended abruptly. No replies, no updates, just silence, as if David Harper himself had simply disappeared. Emily decided she was going to destroy the camera for good. She tried smashing it. She tried burning it. She drove out to the river and threw it into the current. But every single time, by the next morning, the camera was sitting back on her kitchen table, untouched, without a scratch, as if it had never left, as if it wasn't finished with her yet. On the last night, Emily noticed something she hadn't let herself see before. That shadow, the one that had started as nothing more than a smudge, was getting sharper with every photograph. First, it was a blur. Then it took on the vague outline of a person. And now, staring at the last photo she developed of herself in the mirror, that shape had almost fully formed. A figure, taking shape a little more with every single picture, as if it were slowly, deliberately, pulling itself closer to our side of the lens. Today, if you drive out to where that estate sale once stood, you won't find anything. No folding tables, no elderly man, just an empty lot. But every few months, in some quiet town somewhere in the country, someone new picks up an old Rolleiflex camera, dirt cheap, from a stranger they can barely describe afterward. And if you ever come across one, black leather casing, a little rust along the edges, remember this: never point that camera at yourself or anyone you love, because that shadow, the one that gets a little clearer with every photograph, might not just be predicting who's next. It might be looking for a way through. If a story like this ever happens to you, if you ever come across an old camera at a garage sale, a thrift store, or an estate sale that just feels a little off, do yourself a favor and leave it right there on the table. Some things really aren't worth $40. If this video gave you chills, drop a like. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Let me know in the comments. Would you have kept the camera or gotten rid of it the second you saw that shadow? I read every single comment, so don't be shy. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell button, because we drop a new horror story every day. And trust me, the next one might be even worse than this. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.